and then finding that 7-figure product, that group of products that's going to make your first million with an e-commerce business. It's not just a mystery. It's not something that's just led by passion. It's about being methodical, doing your homework, not rushing, and just following the process.
The conventional wisdom, or what you sort of assume is common sense, is that you're looking for a niche that nobody else is in.
Currently, if you're thinking, I have no idea what to sell or how I would select a proven niche, I think you'll have the opposite problem after this episode.
It's a lot easier to tap into an existing market than it is to create a whole new market around the products that you're selling.
It might sound odd if this isn't the way that you've thought in the past, so I certainly wouldn't blame you, because it wasn't the way I thought initially. Welcome to the Dropship Unlocked Podcast. I'm Lewis Smith, the founder of Dropship Unlocked, and with me is our client success coach, James Eardley. Now, when we're not recording the podcast episodes, we're running our own e-commerce businesses and helping aspiring entrepreneurs launch their own high-ticket dropshipping businesses. Keen to build your own 6 or even 7-figure business? My book, The Home Turf Advantage, is your blueprint for launching a profitable online store. Grab your copy at htabook.com today and let's get you started. Now sit back, relax, and let's unlock your potential with the Dropship Unlocked podcast.
Today, we're pulling back the curtain on our method to find 7-figure dropshipping products. To put it simply, we follow a repeatable process that can be completed by anyone with an internet connection to find winning dropshipping products. So, Lewis, I think it's about time that we dedicated an entire podcast episode to one of the most important stages of any e-commerce business.
Definitely is. Yeah, absolutely, James. The truth is that when you're hunting for the perfect product, and I use that term very loosely because I know that there really is no such thing, it isn't about waiting for this lightning bolt of inspiration to just suddenly strike you and then suddenly you have what you need. It's about being smart. It's about doing your homework and really keeping your eyes open for opportunities. So today, let's try and peel back the layers and get into the nitty-gritty of product selection.
Exactly. I'm surprised, we've done 62 episodes so far of the podcast and we haven't covered this topic with its own episode. We've talked about how to find suppliers, but this time we're going to really dive into finding a niche or finding a product to base your store around. So first off, Lewis, I know that we always start this process with some brainstorming, as how every great idea starts. So can you talk us through that way that we brainstorm potential product ideas or potential niche ideas?
Yes, of course. So finding a niche starts with a mix of personal curiosity. So thinking, what am I curious about? Like asking the right questions, but also market awareness and not being too tied into your emotions and letting that dictate you. We want to let the data dictate us. If we want to have a successful business that we can be sure is going to be selling sustainable, reputable, reliable suppliers and products for the long term. So we draw inspiration from everywhere when we go, and I like to just not limit myself initially and just build an initial list of products. So whether that's considering personal hobbies or if it's like frustrations in our daily lives, if you think, there's definitely a market for something slightly better than X, like whatever it is that you may be frustrated about throughout your life, just keep a notepad on your phone and just add to that list over time and try and be more conscious every day of those products that perhaps you just walk past or you'd usually ignore or you just take for granted, and just think, because if they're there in your everyday life, the chances are they also exist in a lot of other people's everyday lives, and therefore perhaps there's a quite in-demand market there for them. I know when I first started brainstorming for dropshipping niche ideas, and I was thinking, how do I come up with inspiration? Because it's difficult. You're sitting in front of a computer and you're like, it's like that writer's block. You look at a blank screen on a document and you're like, well, where do I start? How do I even start this thing? But the way I do it is change my environment. So I would walk around my local neighborhood in London and I would look at the different products around and, people's houses, or walk around shopping centers. And I would just kind of try and see what stood out to me that I thought could be a viable niche. And like I say, without ruling anything out at this stage, I'd just jot it down as a note on my phone so that I'd end up with a good list of 50 potential items. Now, I call this wearing the niche research glasses. That's how I refer to it inside my book, The Home Turf Advantage, and inside our training program. Because once you understand the criteria that we'll run you through in today's episode, it's very difficult to take the glasses off. You're wearing them and you won't be able to stop seeing potential niches. So hopefully that's an advantage, because currently if you're thinking, I have no idea what to sell or how I would select a proven niche, I think you'll have the opposite problem after this episode, where you'll have so many that it's about whittling it down really and choosing the best option, because there are so many that could work. The other ways that you can do it are you can watch YouTube videos. Look at house tours, look at like MTV Cribs or Selling Sunset or $1 Million Listing, or these Netflix shows where they have really like high-end houses. Those people have money, and when they have money and they want to invest in nice things for around their house, they're passionate about those items, they'll often pay a very high amount for them. And so if you can find products that you think match a lot of the criteria that we'll go through in today's episode, then that can help. You've even now got AI. I mean, this kind of thing didn't really exist when I was doing this in 2017, but now you've got ChatGPT or Google Gemini or Claude or whatever you need to use to provide you with the list, and you can feed it those criteria and start to get the cogs turning that way as well. So yeah, I'd usually aim to try and get a list of about 50 different broad product ideas before moving on, because at that stage I can then start whittling things down. But at this initial point, I'm just throwing ideas into the mix.
I remember doing this process, and I was walking around my local area, which is a bit more rural than yours. You were being based in London, and I was walking past sheds that I'd never sort of thought I could sell those. I was writing those down. I started to write down large outdoor ornaments that I was walking past, greenhouses, those types of things. That as I just walked past them, and I knew this was the first stage of finding my winning product, I would just write down all of these ideas, take away the judgment, take away any sort of idea of putting data behind any of the ideas that you write down at this point, because that comes down later. At this stage, it's just a case of getting a nice long list, about 50 or so, and then you can start to whittle down from there. So now you've got that list in place. How do you then ensure that the niches on that list meets the validation criteria that you set out?
Sure. So the validation criteria, I guess you'd think of it a bit like a pilot's pre-flight checklist before takeoff. They have those safety checklists that they have to go through. Now, every box must be ticked on that checklist before they take off, just to make sure that you offer a safe and, in our case, profitable journey. So we'll use tools like Google Shopping and a tool called Keywords Everywhere, and we can link those in the notes below this episode. But that's to ensure that there's a hungry market there waiting for us if we were to go ahead with that niche. Because the last thing you want to do is build your store, sign your suppliers, turn up, and then there's no interest, no demand. Even if you're really passionate about the items, if there's not adequate demand out there, then it's not going to be much of a business, and you're going to have to try and drum up interest, and it's just much easier to serve the existing demand. So let's find where that demand is. So that's one of the first criteria we'd look at. Also, we want to try and find that sweet spot of competition. Some people say, I've found a niche, I think, where there's no one else doing it. And I think I've struck gold. It's a unicorn niche and I'm going to be the first one to break it. What do you think? And I'm like, well, it could work. But for me, that's a big red flag, because that likely means that there's a reason for that lack of competition. And there's probably some big downsides that we haven't yet considered because we're not yet in that market. So I'd proceed with caution at that stage. And I don't know, I'd much rather operate personally in a proven market where I can see that there are competitors already there, already operating successfully, profitably, and have been there for some time as well, because I'll put my own spin on the business that I create. I'll win my share of the market anyway, but I just want to know that there's a big enough market and that there are other people already succeeding, and that there aren't any of these unforeseen pitfalls that prevent people from succeeding in that market. Because if that's the case and I don't know what those are, I'm seeing red flags at that point and thinking, right, there's no competitors here. Why? I don't know if I want to be the pioneer that goes to try and find out.
And that was a really important learning for me when I was starting to find my niche. The conventional wisdom, or what you sort of assume is common sense, is that you're looking for a niche that nobody else is in, that there's so much available room for you to capitalize on a market that hasn't been tapped into yet. But it's the complete opposite. You just got to think to yourself, there must be a reason why those products aren't being sold with competitors that are also online, and therefore it's not going to be viable for you as well, especially not with the first store. best to have that validation straight away up front. So we touched on keywords everywhere there, making sure there's at least 10,000 searches per month in the country that you're selling in for the niche keyword. So for barbecues or garden sheds or whatever it is you've written down on that first list of 50. And then we're also going to make sure that there's competition, crucially, in that niche as well, to tick the first two criteria. You've also mentioned, Lewis, high ticket dropshipping, and that's the way we like to go with our e-commerce businesses for multiple reasons. And I think the average price that we always aim for is above £300 minimum. So how can you assess that one of your niche ideas has an average price above £300?
Yeah, well, the important thing to note initially with the £300 point, that's just a kind of a baseline threshold. That's a starting point and a guide, really. It's not to be taken too literally that it has to be £300 on the dot. But I think anything below that, we're not in the business of chasing pennies here. We want to sell more expensive products because it means we can make more significant profits with fewer sales. There are plenty of niches that are sub £300. I'm not saying that they can't work, but it's about that efficiency and maximizing the value of each transaction if you want to make sure that your business works first time and you haven't done it before. That's the key. If you focus on products that are above £300, what it does is ensures that we're playing in a field where the profit per order can create a sustainable high income business for you quickly. It's like if you're choosing to go and open a restaurant, you say, right, where am I going to open this restaurant? Well, open it in an area where people are willing to pay for a premium dining experience, because then you'll make a much higher margin on every dish that you sell, because you know that the customers there are willing to pay that higher premium for it, rather than being the budget, fast food, high volume alternative. So the way that we find out if a niche has the right level of average price is we look at Google Shopping. I mean, it's as simple as that. We look as if we are an end consumer, a customer, and we just start getting a good feel for where the average of that niche is at. So, of course, there'll probably be exceptions to the rule. This isn't a blanket policy that has no exceptions. There will always be a couple of if you find a product that's maybe £1,000 average, you're always going to find the occasional £200 or £300 competitor that pops up, selling a much, much cheaper, lower quality version of that product. That's not what we're looking for. We're looking for kind of an average core price. That's why we call it an average. What it also does, though, I think it's important to understand the benefit to you as a business owner of selecting products, because I don't want people to just do it because we say that it's a rule, but not understand why. What that means is if I can make one sale for anything less than £600 in ad spend, I'm technically making profit. Now, we make sales at a much, much lower advertising cost than that. For example, your CAC, your customer acquisition cost, might be around £30 or £40 or even £50. But what that means is you're still netting £560 or £550 profit after all of that ad spend, right? If that's your cost per sale. But hopefully you can see why doing it that way is so much simpler for beginners to make it work. Otherwise, if your profit's only, say, £30 per order, you might only be breaking even, or you might even be losing money on each sale if your ad cost starts to creep up too high. And when you're not that experienced with running ads, do you want to be cutting things that fine and relying on £1 or £2 potential profit or dipping into loss making? Or do you just want to make a really clear net profit on every sale that you make? I know which one I'd prefer.
And we've learned that from experience, having both ran low ticket and high ticket businesses. The high ticket business, it's the same amount of effort to sell a high ticket product as it is a low ticket product. So when you have the choice when you first get started, you make much more profit per order with your high ticket products. And so it's the way I decided to go, and it's the way I'll always go in the future, is selling high ticket products. Now, I'm not saying that low ticket dropshipping doesn't work. Of course, there is markets where that works. But for us, when we have the choice and to really put the numbers in your favor, I'd much rather go into a high ticket niche where you need to make less sales. That's less admin, less hassle, less customers to make the same amount of profit. And that's why we go in that route. So we've touched on something before, which I want to go back to, which is making sure there are 10,000 searches every month in the UK for that niche keyword. But why do you think it's so critical to have this level of search volume?
Again, this is a ballpark figure that I've given, but jumping into a market without enough people interested in it is like opening up the shop or the restaurant in a ghost town where there are no customers. So that's what we want to avoid. We use tools like keywords everywhere to make sure that there's already a hungry crowd waiting outside the restaurant for whatever we're selling, right? So that's kind of what we're trying to do by setting that threshold of demand of monthly searches. We need to ensure that we're entering a market where there's already sufficient customer demand for us to come in and capitalize on it and just take our share of it, our slice. We don't need to dominate the entire market. Maybe that happens in the future, but just like a busy market is going to attract more vendors because there's more customers there, so more market stalls will turn up and want to sell their items. A high volume of search demand signals healthy customer interest and intent. So we're looking for those bustling markets. We're not looking for the ghost towns that we can come and open up our shop in and hope that suddenly we can bring the market to us. That's an expensive and risky game to play. So we find out the level of customer demand first by using tools like keywords everywhere. And as I say, we can link that below the episode for anyone that's interested in trying that. It's really easy to use.
Very simple. And as soon as you've realized that there's less than 10,000 searches a month for any of those products that you've got on that initial list that you brainstormed, you can start taking those off the list and just focusing on the ones that have met the criteria so far. And when it comes to search demand, it's a lot easier to tap into an existing market than it is to create a whole new market around the products that you're selling. And especially when we're just getting started with a first store, even a second store, that's much more preferable, a lot less expensive as well to advertise to those people that are already buying. So similarly, when we're choosing this niche, the next step on the criteria is to make sure that we're not entering a niche that's trending down. We want to make sure we're jumping into something that's steady or at least trending upwards. And also we need to make sure that it's not seasonal as well. So how do you use tools such as Google Trends to ensure that a product isn't seasonal or trending down?
Yeah, Google Trends is my go-to for doing that, for making sure that I'm not investing in a fad or something that the demand is just going to die out for. It just helps me spot if a group of products that I'm considering selling are just a passing trend or whether they have the legs to go the distance, right? Google Trends is kind of like it's like a calendar and a weather forecast combined. It shows us if the product is like sunglasses that are just going to be popular in the summer or in hot climates, or if it's more steady, like kitchen knives, something that's going to be popular all year round because people need to cook all year round, right? So we're looking for steady lines, or we're looking for that kind of upwards trajectory. We don't want a product that is seasonal. Otherwise, your whole business is going to only work at one point in the year, and that's not ideal for a consistent, stable income. And if you want to choose a group of products, try and make sure they're not trending downwards, because it's kind of like boarding a sinking ship. If it's not really where you want to invest your time and money, if you can see that market's going down, do you want to be the one that comes in to try and lift it back up? Or do you want to enter a market that is an upwards trend, which is like catching a wave? It's like surfing a wave that's already going into shore. It can carry you far if you time it right and get on board at that point.
Yeah, very important point. And Google Trends is fantastic because it gives you a graph of all of the Google search data, and Google search data is a very good insight into what customers are buying at the time, because so many people use Google to go shopping. So it's fantastic. So again, with that niche list that we're working through, if there's any of those products on your list as you go to search them in Google Trends, if they're seasonal and the graph is really up and down, or if they're trending down, like CDs, for example, that would have been trending down since about 2010. Anything like that, you want to be avoiding that. And then if they don't fall into those categories of being seasonal or trending down, then that niche can carry on to the next criteria, which I know is price consistency. So how important is price consistency in the niche validation process?
Yeah, it's very important. I mean, this particular criteria is about predictability and stability of your brand. So if the prices are all over the place and you come into the market and the same exact product from the same supplier is being sold at £2,000 and then someone else is selling it at £1,200 and it's just all over the place, it's hard to set expectations and maintain a healthy profit margin. In that case, you might be fighting a difficult battle at that point. So price consistency is really key for market stability. It's kind of like you're setting the rules for the game. If everyone knows what to expect, then it's a fair game for everyone. It helps us avoid those markets as well that are prone to price wars. because I learned this the hard way. Competing on price is just a race to the bottom that as a retailer, I would prefer not to enter personally. So some companies it works for, if you want to be a bargain discount store and you want to just sell stuff based on price as your value proposition, good luck to you. But that's not a game I even want to try and win, because the margins become so razor thin that it's just not worth my time. I remember in my first business back in 2017, so I was running a dropshipping business and I'd found a competitor who was undercutting the other retailers in that market for the same brand of products. And I just thought my obvious mental pathway just went to, well, I just need to match them. That's what you do. When someone's undercutting, you have to price match, very naively. So I did. And the dangerous thing about that is you get the confirmation that you made the right move because you suddenly get an influx of sales as well. So you're like, oh, I knew it was the right thing to do. Now I've got more sales coming in. What it doesn't do, though, is reveal the problem that is somewhat masked, because you realize you're hardly making any profit on those sales when you do that. And sometimes you get blinded by the revenue, the top line sales number that's coming in, but you realize on every sale, I'm actually making a lot less than I was when we were just selling at the recommended retail price from the manufacturer. And so interestingly, before I knew it, that competitor whose strategy was like throw together a really cheap looking store and then just undercut everyone had gone out of business. And after a few months, they were just gone. They'd shut down. You go to their website and it wasn't there. And I realized at that point, I'd rather price my product at a stable level that ensures that when I do make sales, they're really nice and profitable. I know that it's stable. I know that it's consistent. And I know that it more than covers what my ad spend would have been on that sale, like I mentioned earlier with the £2,000 example. And so I want to be around for the long term as a retailer. And so I need to make long-term decisions. I need to think about the future of the business, not just making a quick buck and selling things as cheaply as possible. And when I did that, what I realized was that because pricing wasn't the thing I was going to compete on, I had to compete in other areas. So I started to add value to the customer buying experience in other ways, rather than just competing on price, whether that was a free gift that goes with it, whether that was better customer support experience on the website, like better tools to help them select the products that they need. And but by doing that, and you set yourself apart as a premium retailer, you get a better level of customer anyway. They're usually far easier to deal with than the bargain hunters who are just looking for the cheapest itemware. And those really aren't the customers that I want anyway. So that's okay with me. I'm happy to pass those on to the person who is just competing on price and let them kind of mop up the pennies of profit that they might be making on those sales. Instead, we focus on adding value, not undercutting on price, and building a brand, a brand that stands for something beyond just being the cheapest. That's not really the kind of business I want to stand behind anyway. The other thing to mention on that is that we work with suppliers, so premium suppliers, these are top quality suppliers who value the reputation of their brands as well. So if a competitor retailer enters the market, or an existing retailer just decides to start undercutting everybody else because they get greedy and they think, I'm just going to start dropping my prices, what tends to happen is the supplier who is working with them doesn't like it, because it devalues their brand. So sometimes they'll just stop doing business with that retailer altogether because it's cheapening their brand. They don't like it. That isn't the reputation they want to put out. And so they just say, okay, sorry, we're not working with you anymore. And it's perfectly within their right to say that. They don't have to sell to them. And so that tends to be what happens. It is from my experience, I now don't think about it. Of course, I try and make sure I'm priced competitively on our stores, but I'm certainly not trying to be the cheapest. That's not a game I even want to win.
No, and you've been through that, you've learned from it, and now you've added it to the niche validation criteria, so we can avoid going into a market where there's clearly undercutting going on from the very start. So you haven't got to go through that journey of realizing, okay, how am I going to price competitively without taking away all of your margin? And it's not a price war that you want to get involved in at all. And as you said, it comes down to the suppliers really who will enforce that in a market. So you want to go into a market where the suppliers enforce the RRP. And although in the UK, it's a recommended retail price, it's an RRP, and the suppliers can't legally enforce the price for it to be sold at, what they can do is stop supplying the retailers that do undercut. So essentially, they can enforce the price that people are selling at, because they'll just stop supplying if they don't want to. So to complete that stage of the niche validation criteria, the way we do that is by looking at the products within niche that we are potentially going to go into and seeing if there's a consistent pricing across Google Shopping for the exact same product, and put that against maybe 3 or 4 products on Google Shopping and make sure that you're happy that there's price consistency. And then from that initial 50 list, after going through all the criteria that we've talked about today, we'll probably be down to a remaining sort of finalist of maybe 5 or 6 that have made it this far. So the final option now, and to make sure that we can really validate a niche before going into it and being confident that we're going to make a great success, and this is a really important part, is that there are already direct competitors in that market. And something we alluded to earlier in the podcast. So this is obviously potentially opposite of what some people would assume that they're looking for when they get started. So why is it so important that there are already direct competitors in the market that we're going to join?
Yeah, it might sound odd if this isn't the way that you've thought in the past. So I certainly wouldn't blame you because it wasn't the way I thought initially. But having competitors, I've found, is actually a good sign because it means there's a proven demand for what you're trying to sell. Plus, I like to think of competitors as free lessons in what to do and what not to do. If they exist and have existed for some time and are making money, probably doing something right. So why reinvent the wheel completely? Now, I'm not saying copy, but there's definitely ways we can use the inspiration and the path that they've laid ahead to go in and put our own spin and add something new of value to a market. In our program, I talk about having the option of, if you're going to plant a tree, and you have the option of either planting it in a barren area of the forest where nothing seems to grow and it gets no sunlight and there's no nutrients and it's really dry, or you could also plant the seed in a lush rainforest where everything is thriving and there's so many nutrients and sunlight and water and light. Which one are you going to choose, right? You're going to go with the option that is most likely to help the tree grow. And it's the same if you're choosing a market where others are already thriving. It signals that there's enough demand and resources to support that diverse life, or in our case, multiple businesses all succeeding at once. It's just as simple as proof of concept, so we can understand what works, then we can go in, adapt, and then thrive alongside the others.
Exactly. If it's worked for somebody else, it will absolutely work for you as well. So from that list, we'll type in all of the niche keywords into Google, and we're looking to find competitors, other retailers that are selling those products and are online only, and that makes them direct competitors. And once you've confirmed that there's at least 3 within a market, then that ticks that final step of the process, and we know that we can move on and really start selling those products and build a dropshipping business that we can be confident in from the very start. So at the end of the process now, we've validated the niches. We've probably got 3 or 4 finalists that have made it all the way through, and you can choose one that you feel most confident with. What actions should people now take with that information after today's episode to really take action and build a successful e-commerce business?
Well, first up, if you haven't already, then I'd advise giving episode 26 of the Dropship Unlocked podcast a listen. Episode 26 is one where we go all in on what it means to sell high ticket items and why it could be a game changer for you. So that's definitely one to check out, episode 26. And then finding that 7-figure product, that group of products that's going to make your first million with an e-commerce business. It's not just a mystery. It's not something that's just led by passion. It's about being methodical, doing your homework, not rushing, and just following the process. And if you're really serious about making dropshipping work for you, you can check out my book and join our community at htabook.com.
Enjoying the podcast? We'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment or a review, and we might just feature it on an upcoming episode. Also, for detailed show notes and resources, head to dropshipunlocked.com/podcast.
If you found value from any episode of this podcast, please take just 10 seconds to leave us a quick 5-star review on your podcast app of choice. It helps us more than you could imagine. And who knows, you might just hear your comments on the show. Thanks for being part of our community. Your support helps us keep delivering a new episode every week.
Now we're going to answer a question that we've had in from a listener of the podcast. And remember, if you want your questions answered by Lewis, then all you need to do is leave a comment below the YouTube video version of this episode. So this week, the question has come in from Benjamin Cherry, 8100, and he has asked, Lewis, like many, you started your business alongside your full-time job, and you've told us how you manage customers by batching all customer service tasks for 30 minutes in the morning. But how did you manage customer satisfaction? surely if the customers are not able to get immediate contact with the customer service representative, would that annoy the customer?
Yeah, thanks for your question, Benjamin. And I can tell you've been listening to the podcast, so thanks for chiming in. Now, from my experience, managing customer expectations is the key to all of this. If you set clear expectations from the start, let your customers know right up front when they can expect a response, they're not going to get stressed out or angry. The anger or the stress or the disappointment or the frustration usually comes from a mismatch between what the expectation was, i.e. they thought you were going to get back to them immediately or answer the phone straight away, versus what actually happened. It's that disparity between the two that causes the friction. If, for example, if think of it like if you're setting a restaurant reservation, if you book a table in a restaurant, you don't mind waiting if you know that your table is at 7 p.m. If you turn up at 5 and they're like, well, you're 2 hours early, that's kind of accepted in society, isn't it? You go to the table at 7 when you booked it. Now, even yesterday, I had to log a ticket with one of our bank because something wasn't working, something wasn't linking up on one of our systems. Now, I went there and it gives you the different support options, and it had live chat as an option, but it was grayed out. It wasn't there because I think it must have been out of hours. So I clicked the send this ticket by email option, and I got an immediate automated response that said, thank you for your ticket. It's with us team now, and we will get back to you within 24 hours. Expectation set, right? So I can now relax as a customer. The stress is kind of removed from me because I don't have to remember to log that ticket because it's already done. I can kind of forget about it because I know they're taking care of it. I'm not stressed. They're going to come back to me, and probably they'll respond at some point today, and hopefully that'll fix the issue. So in the beginning, it might not be perfect, but if you lay the groundwork for a system that's eventually going to run like a well-oiled machine by setting up those automated responses that say, thank you for your support ticket, we'll get back to you. And then when down the line, when you bring on a virtual assistant to help with customer service, that can be a game changer. There are even services that will answer calls for you if you give them a specific script. So like actual humans that will do this, and I can link the one that we use below in this when we first start out. They'll take the questions down from your customers, they'll jot down the transcript in an email, and then they'll send that email through to you. So at the end of the day, you finish your 9 to 5 job, you come in and maybe you've got 5 phone calls from the day, but you have the customer's email, you have their message, and you have their phone number. So you can either call them back or you can just respond in a batched email process within a 30-minute window, and you've managed your business for the day. And the whole time the customers knew to wait for that response because that was the expectation. So there are 2 ways of doing it, or there's several ways of doing it. You can either just manage expectation and get back to them, or you could even use a service like the one we'll link below to answer your phones for you. And I think you pay per call for using a service like that until you're ready to hire a full-time virtual assistant who can come in and be your customer support person.
Perfect. Exactly, Lewis. All about managing expectations when we first get started. So thank you for your question, Benjamin. Now we'll highlight a recent review that we've had for the podcast. Something I love to do as we tie up the podcast. And a big thank you to LR Brown 06 for sharing your thoughts in a recent YouTube comment actually that came in beneath a podcast episode. And LR Brown said, really informative. I've been subscribed, following for a while now, and I've really enjoyed learning from you.
Big thanks, LR Brown 06. It's hearing things like that keep us going. So thanks to you, and thank you to everybody who's listening as well. If you think there's someone in your circle who could benefit from our chat today, why not send them a link to this episode or this podcast on WhatsApp? It's a simple gesture. It would take you just a few seconds, but it could be the nudge that they need to start their own journey alongside you.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Dropship Unlocked podcast. We hope you're walking away with insights and inspiration.
To kickstart your e-commerce journey, grab a copy of my book, The Home Turf Advantage, at htabook.com. It's a distilled guide based on real experience to help you build your e-commerce venture.
Don't forget to hit the subscribe button for more strategies and success stories. And if you like what you heard, a 5-star review would mean the world to us, and you might just get a shout out on an upcoming episode.
And finally, thank you for deciding to spend your time with us today. We can't wait to bring you more insights on the next episode of the Dropship Unlocked podcast.